Welcome to another tutorial, and this tutorial is actually based off of another tutorial made by Evan Abrams, and this is a really cool tutorial, and it's basically explaining what the sample image expression does and how it works. So definitely check this out before trying out the effect that we're going to be creating in my tutorial. This video explains everything that you need to know. I'll briefly explain what the expression does, but I won't go into too much depth about it. So let's create a new project and let's create a new composition, and this composition will be named square. Let's maybe use width 25 by height 25, and I'm using a duration of 150 frames, which is roughly 5 seconds. Alright, and here I will create a new solid. Let's press S for scale, and let's create an animation for the scale, and let's set a keyframe for 0% at frame 0. Let's move forward to frame 10. Use another value of 100. Alright, so we are creating this nice scale up animation. And let's press T for opacity, make a keyframe, move forward to frame 15, make a keyframe for 25, then move forward to frame 20 and make a keyframe for 100. Right, so essentially this animation looks something like this. Alright, so it's a simple scaling up and then revealing sort of like a flicker effect. Also here I'm gonna go ahead and add another solid layer. Let's switch to my rectangle tool, mask tool here, double click to add a rectangle mask. Grab each of these points by double clicking, and this will give you the transform properties of the mask, and then I will drag this in and hold Control and Shift, just create this this mask, and set this mask to subtract, which just creates basically this border. And this will just simply add a bit of randomness and more interesting effect in the final result. Also, I want to animate the opacity of this border, so press T for opacity and make an animation from 0 to 100. Alright, so this is the result. Let's place this square in a new composition, and this composition I'm gonna go ahead and rename this to square underscore 4, and I'll make the width 50 and height 50, and I'll drag this over in this corner and hold Control Shift to snap it right inside the corner here, and let's press Control D to duplicate this. Alright, and then I'll drag this below, make another copy and place this here, and another copy, and basically fill out this entire composition. Also here I want to offset these layers a bit to create some randomness. Alright, just make sure that the animation, all of these animations end by frame 30. So at frame 30 onwards you shouldn't have any more animation. This square underscore 4 I'll drop inside a new composition. Go to settings here and rename this to square reveal, and make the width 1000, height 1000. And basically in this composition we will multiply this layer a bunch of times and fill up this entire composition. But before we do that, we will actually need to link all of these clones to a layer which will drive the entire animation. And let's go ahead and create a new composition, and this will be reveal underscore comp, and make a new solid here, and let's grab my ellipse tool, double click, and let's make this big enough so it fills up the entire composition. Let's go to mask path and set a keyframe for the mask as it is now, and I'll just drag this keyframe over maybe to frame 60, grab my mask again, and then scale this until it almost entirely disappears. So we end up with this animation. Also for this layer I want to add a fast blur and set the fast blur to repeat edge pixels, and let's increase the blurriness here, and this is essentially what I'll be using to create the feather, so maybe 250. Right around in the middle of the animation I want to add a keyframe for the blurriness, and then move forward or actually backwards to the beginning of the animation and set another keyframe for maybe 25. So at the beginning of this reveal I don't want the feathering effect to be as intense, and this increases as the animation progresses. Alright, and this will be good for now. Let's go back in our square reveal, go to our project and drop my reveal comp. And we don't need to see this reveal comp, so I'll shut this off. So here is where the sample image expression comes into play, and I'll apply the expression to the time value of the layer. So go to time and enable time remapping, and Alt and click the stopwatch here for the time remap to add the expression. And first I will pick whip this reveal comp, so I want the expression to look at this comp, and then type dot sample image, and that's with a capital I. Let's open and close parentheses, and in between parentheses I will type transform dot position, comma, open and close brackets, and in between brackets we will type 1, 1, and then at the end of all of this we will open and close brackets again and type 0. Oh, looks like I misspelled the transform word here, so that's transform dot position. Alright, so that's the expression. So I can see that this isn't actually working, and that's because in the reveal comp I forgot that this, as it is right now, this has transparency, and we don't want any transparency in this composition because we have to use all of the color information from within this composition. So basically all you have to do here is Control Y to create a new layer, and let's change this color to black, hit OK and set this below our layer. Alright, so now that gets rid of the transparency from this composition. Now if I go back in my reveal, I can see that the animation is working as it should. Alright, so here's how this works is, let's actually reveal our composition here, and let's make the opacity here maybe 35%, just so we know better what's going on. And as I grab this layer and move it around the composition, you can see how the animation actually changes. Alright, so as this turns to complete white, the animation finishes, and wherever it's black, the animation hasn't started, and anything in between will control the actual animation. So basically all that's left now is to fill up this entire composition with this layer. So in order to do this, we will be using the utility box script. So this is a free script that's available on my website, very easy to install and use. And actually there's nothing to install, you can actually just run it from File, Scripts, Run Script command, and the function that we're going to be using is this clones function. But before that we actually need to do a few things before we actually duplicate the layer and fill up the composition. So the first thing here is I'll grab this square layer and press A for anchor point and set this to 0 and 0. Then I need to drag this over in this corner and press Ctrl Shift to snap. And also each time this layer will be duplicated, I want it to have a different rotation of 90 degrees. Alright, so I want some layers to be rotated 90 degrees, some 270 degrees, and some 180 degrees, just to create a nice random effect which will give it a more organic feel. And to achieve this, we will actually use an effect called transform, which is basically the same as our transform properties. So let's double click to add this, and so each time this will be duplicated, I want the rotation to be a random value between the numbers that I mentioned earlier. And to do this, we can use an expression, and let's Alt and left click the stopwatch here for rotation to add our expression. So we'll need to generate a random number and then use the number and multiply it by 90 degrees. Alright, so this will be a seed random, and that's with a capital R. And in between parentheses, I will place 1, comma, true. Alright, and x will be our random number, so type x equals random, and in between parentheses we can use 0 and 10. So this will generate me a random number between 0 and 10, and a random number between 0 and 10 can actually be like 4.2, and instead of 4.2 I want this to be rounded to 4 or 5 or whatever it's closest to. So in order to do this, we can use an expression math dot round, and in between parentheses we will use the x number that we used earlier, and now this rounded out number I want to multiply by 90. Alright, so this layer will have a rotation of 0, and if I create a duplicate, now this layer has a rotation of 180. Create another duplicate, this will have 90, so you get the idea. So now we can finally go ahead and actually duplicate these layers. Go to the clones function in the utility box script, and in order to fill out this entire composition we will be needing 20 and let's see, so 20 clones for the horizontal dimension and 20 for the vertical one, and the distance between these clones will be 50, which is the height and which is the size basically of this composition. Alright, so now if I click create, give it a few seconds. Alright, and we're starting to see the result here. Let's go to the end of our composition here, and I'll actually disable this reveal comp so we don't need to see this anymore. Alright, so this is the result. Now this is actually creating 400 clones, and you can see that it's lagging quite a bit, but once you figure out this reveal animation and how you want it to look, you can go ahead and render that, and we will do just that. Now if I go back to my reveal comp, I can add certain effects to this to make it a different look. So for example, let me actually show you the benefits of using this technique. Is now if I disable this white solid and make a new white solid and add a linear wipe transition to this, and let's create a simple animation here. Alright, add the keyframe and increase the feather. Now if I go back in my square comp, we get a completely different animation. And also, if you go back in your original square, if I create a mask here and set this to stencil, alright, basically you can, any changes you make here can be seen here, so you can kind of get an idea of how this works. And this can be hexagons or doesn't have to be squares. So that's the power behind this effect. Let's go back and delete these layers and go back to my original circle mask. For this guy I just want to add a turbulent displace effect and just give it create more randomness and make it look a little bit more organic, maybe increase the amount. And also let's animate this amount to be 0 in the beginning. Alright, and back in our square reveal, you kind of see this nice looking organic effect. Let's maybe preview, make a small animation preview and see if the animation speed is appropriate, so we can go ahead and then render this and use it in our final animation. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and create a pre-render here, and we can just leave this as square reveal. Let's go in our settings here, and I'll just use QuickTime and format photo JPEG. Set this to 100 quality, RGB, hit OK, and hit render. Right, so I'll create a new composition here, and this will be final. And let's make this full HD and leave it at 5 seconds. I'll draw my logo, and actually I'll Control-Shift-C to pre-compose this, and let's name this logo holder. Alright, just so I'm using a pre-comp, so in case you need to change something in the logo, you only need to do it once. Let's drop our square reveal render. So this is the layer that we've created. Let's go ahead and actually don't want to see this layer, and for this logo holder I'll use an effect channel, set matte, and for my matte layer I'll use square reveal, and I want this to look at the luminance. Alright, so now our logo is actually revealing. You can see that this effect is stretch, so you have to turn off stretch matte to fit. I think, yeah, let's take care of the other layers now and add the camera later. So I'll duplicate this square reveal, and let's turn on this layer. And for this layer I want to use again a channel set matte, and I want this to look at our logo holder, and select stretch matte to fit. So deselect this just so it's not stretched, so we end up with this, and also leave this at look at alpha channel. Let's add another effect, and let's add another copy of this set matte effect. And for this set matte, I want this to look at a different layer. I want this to look at itself rather. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this second square reveal, duplicate this. I'll place this above my square reveal with the set matte's effect, and I'll set the second set matte effect to be the first square reveal. Let's look at the luminance, and let's use invert matte. And if I solo this layer, now you can kind of see the effect that we are getting. So it's the same layer, which is this first one. It's using the same layer to sort of mask itself out by using the invert option for the set matte. And the great thing about this is if I grab this layer and offset this in time, now you can see kind of the effect that we're getting. Alright, so it's like using a second copy of this effect to mask itself out basically. Alright, everything should be good for now. Let's grab this layer and this layer, press F4 and make these 3D layers. Let's also grab a new solid and let's name this to BG and add some color to this. Let's add a ramp effect, and let's use a radial ramp, and for the second color let's use a blue, and the second color will be dark. Offset these points maybe a bit like so, and let's go ahead and create our camera now. So new camera, and I'm using a camera with the angle view of 90 degrees, so hit OK. Let's also make a new null layer and make this null layer 3D. This null layer I'll rename to camera help. This camera I'll make it a child of the camera help. So this null object is basically here just to help me control the camera a little bit, make things a little bit easier. So if I grab this camera help now and use my rotate tool, which is W, and you can see that we can use the null object to create the exact angle that we are looking for. And also now if I press C for my camera tools, and let's press C again, I can move the camera, and I'm scrubbing through the camera controls here between track, orbit and track Z to just find a good angle for this logo. And also again I can use the actual null object to create this kind of like this animation here. Alright, I think that's pretty good for now. Let's maybe create that exact animation. So just add keyframes here. So let's go to rotation, or let's make a keyframe for orientation. Move forward a few frames, maybe to 80, and change the value here, and this will create this nice camera animation. Now I want to create a duplicate of these two layers, so camera and camera help, Control D. Let's place these below our so above the square reveal layer, and let's grab this and this layer as well, Control Shift C to pre-compose, and this will be overlay. Let's name this composition overlay, hit OK. Alright, press F4 and I'll set this to add. Alright, so we are getting there slowly. Let's add an effect. Let's add a curves to this layer and maybe drop the brightness a bit. Let's add a tritone and give this some color. Alright, maybe a lighter blue. And of course, let's also add a glow and spread out the radius and maybe decrease the threshold. Alright, so pretty close to the original look. Let's duplicate this overlay effect and solo this, and I'll go ahead and remove all of these effects here, and I want to add an effect called find edges, and this find edges I'll set to invert. Let's add another curves now and drop the curves maybe a bit, and let's add effect radial fast blur, and let's change the center and give this a nice angle and maybe increase the amount. We can now add a tritone and also give this a nice blue color, and also add a glow, spread the radius, and if I unsolo this, right, it's looking pretty good. You can go ahead and make changes to the color of these layers as needed, but the effect is basically this. One final thing that we can add is actually a fill background for the logo. Let's go ahead and add another white solid, and let's name this noise and add a fractal noise. Alright, and let's set this to block and actually make this a 3D layer, and just increase the scale here just so it fills the screen. Let's maybe set the complexity to 1.5, and let's give the animation the evolution a little bit of animation. So time multiplied by 150. Alright, and maybe in the transform options I'll drop the scale. And now if I set this layer to, let's see, soft light and decrease the contrast, you can see how easily we can make a fill layer, just so it's not floating in like unpopulated space. And if I actually duplicate this noise and set this one to add, I can use that find edges effect here, set this to invert and add a color correction tritone. Let's make this a nice blue and add a curves, increase the contrast and also add a stylized glow, spread out the radius. Alright, so this is just a secondary layer just to add a little bit more detail, and we can make our final preview now. So that's pretty much the effect. As I said earlier, this is more like an expansion on Evan Abrams' tutorial on the sample image expression, which again, if you haven't, definitely check that out. That's it for now though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.